I'm Kathy Ramsey. For those of you who don't know me, I am the Partnership Manager here at TIC-SA. I hope everybody's got a drink and settled in. It's kind of afternoon tea time, isn't it? A cuppa. I don't have a cuppa, but I have got my glass of water here. Our In Conversation series is a program that we undertake generally monthly to keep the South Australian tourism industry engaged and informed. I'll introduce Stuart, our speaker, in a moment, but just to run through a couple of housekeeping matters first. If everybody could please keep their microphone on mute. We will use the chat function as for any questions or comments, and really encourage, use these sessions. You'll get out of it as much as you put into it. So use these questions for anything. Use this session and use the chat function to ask any questions. We will endeavour to work through those questions as we go throughout the session, but we also have got some time for some Q&A at the end if needed. Yes, lovely. Thank you so much. So our guest speaker today is Stuart Quigley from Gallagher Insurance. Stuart has over 18 years experience with professional and financial risk insurance. And today he's going to be giving us a really great introduction to cyber and the intersection of cyber and how the importance of insurance is aligned to cyber. Welcome, Stuart.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great. Thanks for coming on board today, Stuart. Cyber security, wow. We all know it's a big topic. It's certainly not a sexy topic by any means, but it's actually really important. It's a really key area we as in the industry need to understand, because I'm sure we've all sort of felt, had some exposure to it potentially on a small personal scale as well. So just to kick things off, Stuart, probably best to start us is, what is cyber insurance? And cyber, when we talk cyber security, what is it? And why is it important that we have a look at it on an insurance perspective?
Yeah, thanks. Look, I think the biggest thing about cyber is it's such an emerging risk or exposure for business. And it can be, because of that, it can be a scary topic because it's very new for people who maybe haven't had, unless they have some sort of tech background, they don't really have a lot of exposure to the terminology maybe, or that everyone kind of thinks that is your iPhone or just your laptop or emails itself. But it's, as we can see, it really is a global emerging trend as well. So it's, it's impacted by, global influences like things like what we're seeing in Ukraine and Russia. So it's very much a broader, bigger aspect than what many people kind of think it is. And a lot of people can kind of look at it or tunnel their vision into very much more of a loss of income exposure or fraud event exposure, as opposed to what or how an event and what an event is and how it occurs and how can we actually manage that event. Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing with cyber at the moment.
Absolutely. So I think it's important that one thing you said, it's about language, and I'd like to pull on that because it is cyber is and cyber security and cyber risk. It's really a language that is being evolved and it's popping up and being used every day now. Where you talk about, 5 years ago, I might be wrong there, but it probably wasn't used as widely on a day-to-day language. And I think it is important because I sort of circled to it when I did the intro about we all might think we've had some personal encounters with it, but sort of cyber and the real credit card fraud that happens sort of gets close. It sort of nearly gets grouped in the one basket, but there's one probably leads to another. So when we talk cyber threats, let's talk about what that looks like in sort of layman's terms, Stuart. What's a cyber threat, and what's perhaps some examples that we could relate to, so we can just start to educate ourselves on that?
Yeah, so the threat really, it does evolve. So we see from a exposure point of view, that it has changed pretty much every year for the last 5 years. It may have started as more of an email encryption kind of issue, where there's been a lack of control and an email has been intercepted, to then it's kind of moved to more of your, physical exposures of a loss of privacy and data that's not on a network, for example. And it's then also moved to things like ransomware, which is really big at the moment. So I'll run through a really kind of live example a bit later around that, because I've been involved in a ransomware incident in the last few months, not personally, but one of my clients. So it really has evolved, and it continues to evolve. So it's very hard to keep up with a lot of the exposures that do exist. So it's really about, trying to normalize it yourself and really understand what is important around a cyber incident. And if a cyber incident occurs, whether it be physical, whether it be through an email issue, or whether it be through a lack of controls around things like what we call multi-factor authentication, which is a big thing at the moment, which is, working from home has really evolved. And that's that second factor, password or authentication to get into your network, whether it be issues that arise from that. So it's really about saying, okay, well, what is an incident that could occur? What's the biggest ones? And then, really making sure that you're aware of what the importance is of a response to that incident.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Stuart. So it's really about user awareness, isn't it? User awareness on potential risks in our own business, and then those potential, how that transfers to potential dangers. So and this is, this is a first for Ticker Say I'm talking on cyber, and we're going to start to take this journey with our audience. But in the beginning, potential risks. So what are, I suppose, risks equals targets in terms of what is the perpetrator. So what are the common targets of cyber attacks? Can you sort of give us some examples we could relate to? So, a business that's perhaps been impacted, how were they impacted? What was the threat?
Yeah, so I guess it comes back to that involvement. So initially we saw a lot of attacks, through which generally come through a weakness in your network, whether it be through a patching issue, which patching is updating your software basically. So we all patch our phones. When we update our iPhones, when they tell us there's an update, that's a patch, security patch. It actually is making your phone more secure. Apple have identified a vulnerability, and then they are there telling you to update the phone, which is saying that you're going to get a better camera, or you're going to get a better, quicker service, but it's really actually protecting a vulnerability. So when that comes through, what we saw initially, we saw a lot of organizations that held really sensitive, personally identifiable information. So a lot of your medical services, hospitals, daycare centers, a lot of those types of organizations that hold, when we say sensitive, we're talking sensitive information that can really identify you outside of bank account details. It's your health records. It's something that is unique to you, as opposed to things like dates of birth or email addresses and things like that.
Yeah, sure. So for Stuart, for an accommodation provider, that could be their booking platform, which has a guest name, a guest phone number, and credit card details potentially. If that booking platform isn't addressing the cyber risk there, am I correct in my assumptions there?
Yeah, correct. But what we've seen with that now is that going away from that pure sensitive data, where again more identifiable to you, they're now just coming in and using your inability to access your network to demand ransoms and things like that. So they're actually not really targeting the data or the information as such. They don't really want to use it. They haven't got much use for it. So things like credit card information, whilst they can use that for a fraud and steal identities. What we're seeing a lot more now is actually stopping you a business from actually operating. That's what they're trying to do. So it's that bringing into that that vulnerability, and entering your network through that vulnerability, and then basically shutting down all of your access. So a booking system is a really good one in that, is that, you know, how can you earn income if you can't actually book your clients and get payment for that?
So I absolutely understand where you're going with that, Stuart. So yeah, coming in and shutting down platforms that are critical to a business's operations, rather than necessarily the data itself. It's that platform that's critical to the operations. Am I correct in, you know, on the same page there?
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly what we're seeing now. That's the big rise in, and is actually impacting on cyber insurance as well, because the actual loss is a lot larger than what it was when they were really just targeting data and selling data on the dark web.
Absolutely. So I suppose if we're, you know, and I'm trying to put, we've got a wide range of different type of operators on the line today. So, you know, I think for our operators on the line, am I correct in saying, have a look at how your business, your systems are operating, and what could be your greatest liability if someone could get control over that, albeit through your Wi-Fi potentially? Yeah, so I think that's what we need to start to think about, and I hope that poses a question for everybody on the call today, just to start thinking about their property management systems, or if it's an online booking systems they're using, because that would obviously be critical to the operations of your business. So based on that, how would you respond then if you've got a cyber? So what are the first points of call? So, you know, I have a booking, I'm an accommodation operator, and my online booking system has been targeted. And therefore no one can make any online bookings. I can't access any of the information in there. So, you know, how would you respond? What would be the first things an operator would do?
Yeah, and I think that's part of the one of the biggest things that we ask our clients is, you know, what, in the event of a cyber event, how are you? What is your plan? How are you going to respond to this? And a lot of people kind of shake their heads and maybe point to their IT provider. But their IT provider generally isn't a cyber expert. They don't manage cyber incidents. They manage your network. Or they manage your laptops. I mean, it's a very tough one. So it's about awareness for clients. I'll probably just use this time now to really, I guess, talk through the example that I've seen live.
That would be great.
Been involved in. I was on daily calls 2-3 times a day, sometimes on this. And again, it was all about the management of the incident. So a local South Australian company, they, you know, literally walked in on a Monday and went to log in to their network, and a message came up saying, "We have your data. Please, we will forward you contact details, etc. later, and please contact us." And that was it. Now, they had to respond immediately. So no one can access emails, no one can access files, any data, bank billing systems, anything like that. So they've got no ability to operate. They purchased a cyber insurance policy, and part of that is there is an offering around an incident response. So it's about being nimble and working very quickly to try and manage that incident and get experts in. So none of us are, I'm a cyber insurance expert, I'm not a cyber incident management expert. So it's about getting the people that can assist as quickly as possible. So it's getting you back on your feet, operational as quickly as you can. Now that needs to be done through a lot of different things of, you know, working with, say, your network provider, your managed service provider, your IT provider, to investigate what's happened, what data they got, how they done it. It's then also bringing in, as I said, with these ransomware. So, you know, a demand's been made. It's about negotiation as well with these cyber criminals. And then it's slowly restoring data in the background as well. So it's using your things like backups, that if you're making daily backups or weekly backups, I mean, that's the quickest you can get back on your feet is by bringing that data back in, and then starting again. So at least you've got some operational component of your network. So that incident response side of things again, and while a lot of people think of the exposure around personal data, it's not really that. It's about the business operations themselves and being able to get back on your feet as quickly as possible.
Sure. So I suppose in that sense, how does my insurance policy help? So if I had an insurance policy on cyber and an incident has happened, how is sort of my insurance broker the first port of call, or how does my policy help me, assist in that sort of incident response?
Yeah, so we partner with a certain insurer where we use them majority times in a company called Chubb Insurance, but it really depends on the product and what their offering is. But the best offerings on around incident response is actually having access to an incident response manager through like a phone application. So you can just press a button on your phone and you get a call from an incident response manager that you have access to, who can then manage your incident on your behalf. So I guess that's the biggest, at this stage, the most important part of an insurance policy is almost mitigating the rest of the exposure that may be covered by the policy, but it's actually assisting you in getting back on your feet as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I see there two things. If I was to sit down and if I had Kathy Ramsey walking tours or something like that and haven't got insurance, I'm sure you would assist talking through that risk mitigation and what sort of risk policy strategies I'd have in place for my business, albeit Kathy Ramsey walking tours would have none at this stage. But then it's about that service when I am impacted, to be able to hold my hand to navigate through what for a lot of people would be, and I would say, it's a pretty foreign experience, but foreign territory as well, to be able to actually decode and understand how do I navigate through such an incident. So having that incident response is, vital, and it's great to know that that's actually that fundamental part of your insurance as well.
Yeah, and again, a lot of that is actually cash flow protection, for example. So who has the cash flow to have third-party experts come in and manage an incident on their behalf without any insurance, any insurance protection. So they're not passing those costs onto an insurance policy. So it's about, depending on paying us what may be considered a large premium, it might not be considered a large premium, I'm not too sure, but a couple of $1,000s to manage an incident that could cost upwards of $50,000 to $100,000. So it's that cash flow protection is part of that, the importance of the insurance policy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So Stuart, you're posing a lot of thoughts in my head, and this is where I want to put it to the rest of the people on the call. Really open for you to get on the chat if you want to have a question, and we've got a nice user group too, so we can always take you off mute too, so you can talk to Stuart directly, because if you're not quite sure if something's of a risk into your business or not, this is an opportunity to pick an expert's brain, dare I say, on, just determining potentially what elements of your business are at risk and what you're considering. So yeah, like I just said, everybody feel free to welcome to use the chat function and reach out. We'll continue to navigate, push on, Stuart.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about, so we really now know what are some of the risks, what is a cyber attack, and we know what that can do, what the compromises can be, and then why insurance is important, because it's actually looking at the risk before it's happened, but it's this the support when it does happen, I think, is really important too. So looking at and that assists in responding to cyber attacks, that support. So insurance policy, the policy coverage, what are the most important elements we should be looking at for any businesses that do already have cyber, or if you don't have cyber, what are some of the things we should be looking at in terms of policy cover?
Yeah, so a good cyber insurance policy really follows the time frame of a cyber attack. So it has that initial incident response and assists you in the management of that. It pays a lot of those first party costs of, as I said, an incident response manager has access to specialist vendors, whether it be a PR firm, whether it be a law firm for notification advice, or whether it be, as I said, someone to negotiate with threat actors, or cyber criminals. But it then would go to a protection from a business interruption perspective. So a good business pack or property style policy has gets your business back on its feet in the event of a fire, as quickly getting it back to its feet as possible. So this is exactly the same, just more, this is a financial loss as opposed to a physical asset loss. So you kind of almost got to think of your network as your physical asset. So you can't access that. It's about what are the costs of those increased costs of working to get the business back on its feet as well. And that's data restoration, that's producing or getting your backups back on board to get the business operational again. And then from there, it really does also, I guess this is where a lot of people think of cyber, is also that privacy aspect of where someone's personal information is stolen, and then the potential third-party claims for breach of privacy and things like that. So it also has that aspect. So it follows that kind of timeline. First, you have the incident, then you have the cost of getting the business back up, and then you have the potential third-party claims.
Oh, sorry, I've done this a bit and I still keep myself on mute sometimes. Now, I think you touched on an important thing, and I apologise if we take us off course here a little bit, Stuart, but you talked about personal and privacy there. Now, I'm probably quick to admit I actually have been the victim of identity theft and fraud previously, and I probably would have put that in the cyber basket of having, I've had a cyber attack on me. Let's provide some clarity about that, so how we can determine perhaps it was the cyber attack that led to it, or the fraud could lead to a cyber attack. But could you just provide a bit of clarity around that, Stuart? Because I know I've misinterpreted, and I'm sure it's others as well. But yeah, this fraud and identity theft is happening on people's personal lives. But yeah, how it's sort of just some clarity.
Yeah, I think it's probably best off using that kind of example as cyber event that against a business that leads to a fraud within the business. I think that's probably the best one from instead of a privacy perspective. So this is where we might see email compromise. So your email has been compromised, and an email has been received by an accounts team where the email appears that it's come from a principal of the company, or a director, or finance manager, whoever it may be, demanding an urgent payment to a supplier for a contract or something like that. What we see there is generally the email compromise has come through, again, a cyber criminal hacking through a vulnerability of your network, and then sending an email that appears to look or appear legitimate, that it's come from someone quite senior in the organization. That's a cyber incident, and you need to investigate how that's occurred. You need to remove malware within the systems. You need to restore data. You need to do all that. That's cyber. Now, no fraud actually occurs until someone in the accounts team makes that payment. So it's almost like an employee almost transferring funds to themselves, but it's just going to a different fund. It's going to a criminal's bank account. So that's one way of really kind of differentiating between this is a cyber event, but there may not be a fraud event that occurs. It doesn't happen until generally an employee doesn't check bank account details, there's a request to change bank account details, for example. Someone now looking like it's a normal supplier, they send an email saying, can you please change our bank account details and make a payment to this account? And they don't check or validate the change in bank account details. So again, that can be covered off by what we call social engineering fraud sometimes, but it is quite separate from a cyber incident. So it's about understanding.
To get some clarity there, Stuart, to realise that they're aligned, but they're two separate matters too.
Correct.
And correct me if I'm wrong there, but that's where it's so important to have some really good, strict procedures and policies around that payment of suppliers or third parties and other people, outgoing payments.
Yeah, correct.
In your business.
And it can be, you know, we always talk about, you know, dual authorities and things like that, but it could also just be that callback procedure. A very simple, you know, you get a request to change bank account details, you pick up the phone, call the client and ask them just to confirm that you've sent this to me before I make a payment. And a lot of times we've heard stories of clients saying, no, they've rung them up and said, what are you talking about? I haven't sent you an email at all. So
yeah, that's a really quick, simple thing, isn't it, to be able to do, and it doesn't require too much effort.
Correct, yeah. And a lot of times it's very hard to get those funds back.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, like you said, the consequences could be great on the other side. So yeah, just making sure there's those standard operating procedures in place as well. So, you know, we understand some of the we probably understand what cyber is, and you know, this is the first of this conversation we're starting with our audience here today, and just trying to develop some awareness around cyber, so we really understand what cyber is and how they can occur. What should we be expecting for 2022 in terms of cyber, Stuart? And you know, obviously, and how's the insurance market evolving, because it's an ongoing risk. It's really an emerging risk. It's constantly changing. So, you know, are there some concerns that we should already start to have on our front foot around in relation to cyber for this year? And yeah, how's insurance? How's the policies evolving to protect?
Yeah, definitely. Look, so I mean, there's definitely expectation that we're going to see increased cyber attacks. So we're going to see with the impact of you know, the war in Ukraine. I was on a call a few weeks ago where it was raised that you know, a downturn in employment in Russia, for example, will lead to increased cyber criminals. So because people still need to put food on table. So the expectation is that cyber attacks will increase and become more targeted. But the biggest thing, and what the way the insurance market is responding, is a real focus on a business's controls. What controls do they have in place? Network controls to prevent, or you know, as best they can prevent a cyber attack. You know, at this stage, at one point that's become very common, and I spoke through multi-factor authentication around, especially accessing your network from home and having those two-way confirmations. That is now a minimum, pretty much, requirement in the insurance market for you to get any cyber insurance. That wasn't the case, you know, 12 months ago. It was a very good control to have in place, but if you don't have that control, a lot of insurers will decline your risk immediately, because again, that's one of the biggest vulnerabilities that we're seeing that leads to, you know, big ransomware claims. It's still good to have, you know, your typical backups, as I spoke about, encryption of some of your you know, sensitive data, obviously your standard kind of antivirus firewalls, all of that. But it's really taking a lot of time to really invest a little bit into your network, and things like that multi-factor authentication can be turned on very quickly and easily without being a tech expert. But I do know that Microsoft 365, if you're using that platform, you can turn it on very quickly by increasing your subscription. So that's how the insurance world is responding from an underwriting perspective. But at the same time, they're really now started to restrict some cover as well, and we're seeing new exclusions, new endorsements come in that are very brand new. You know, the leaders are only just responding to things like the war in Russia and Ukraine. So it's very new, and we're not sure exactly where it's going to lead up. But we're seeing what we call capacity, or your limit of indemnities, and the insurer's maximum limit of indemnities or capacity they can put out is reducing completely. So it's very, or some insurers are pulling out altogether. They won't write new cyber because it's the claims are way outweighing the premium pool. So we're going to see the increased cost of cyber. We're going to see a very closer underwriting from insurers, and then we're going to see, a lot more lower limits, I guess, and especially in ransomware, where insurers might say we have a $1 million limit, but we're only going to limit that for 250,000 or something like that.
Essentially, am I correct in sort of guessing if you're not in cyber now, it could be pretty hard to get policy moving forward if you're not addressing it now?
Correct. Yeah. So we've been having these conversations with our clients for a long time, and the uptake still hasn't been there because it's still that education process. But it is very important that once you're in, it's easier to stay in than it is to get in later on. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think it's hard because it's not tangible. Like I said, it's a language, it's awareness of language. It's nothing we've sort of been evolved to, but you don't want to get stung before you learn your lesson either, because especially for small business, any business owners, I think we know that actually the risk is the same, small or large business. And you don't want to get stung by that. Understanding, Stuart, that risk is the same for small or large businesses. It's the ability to shut down platforms that make you operate your business, essentially. The one thing is different. It's about budget, and small businesses don't necessarily have the budgets that large businesses have for protection. And we know the market is harder to get into. So, Kathy Ramsey's walking to us. How would I start to protect my business? Where do we start?
The start is that risk management. It is that network security. That's your first step, because, as I said, you can't get an insurance policy sometimes if you don't have a certain basic level of control. The good news is, on the pure SME side of things, it's not as hard, and we're not seeing the big changes. We will see some changes eventually, but there's still very competitive premiums. We haven't seen the like. So Chubb Insurance has said who is our preferred, I guess, supplier for that, and I've actually worked for Chubb previously as well. They're not focusing on that end of town. So the good news there is that you can still get a very competitive cyber product, but they have brought in some of those risk controls that need to be in place, like your multi-factor authentication. So that will generally be a decline if you don't have that for Chubb on that SME side of things, but they haven't increased excesses, and they haven't increased premiums as much as what they have on the more mid-market end of town.
Yeah, fabulous. So I've got two here, Stuart. I'm thinking, what are our 3 priorities we need to walk away with today? So I've got network security, multi-factor authentication. What other priorities are you wanting us to walk away with today? And I'm going to pop this in our email to everybody as well.
Yeah, I think it's really just to have a look internally to see what would be the impact if you couldn't access your network or your website for a week, or how long can you survive without access to your how you generate income. So that, I guess, that's the next step. So that will give you a bit of a level of feel of one, what's from that budgeting perspective, but also, is there a very true or a real way of transferring that risk to an insurance policy, because it can assist you in getting back on your feet a lot quicker. So that's probably the third takeaway, because that will give you a lot of insight into the ability for you to continue to operate going forward. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's all about, we've developed a lot of resilience. Has been a big word we've used in the last 2 years, and we've all developed resistance in different ways, in different ways. But I think it's now about cyber and that cyber security resilience, and how we're looking at that internally with businesses. Because I'm sure know one thing, clear thing, the threats are only going to get bigger and increase more in relation to cyber. So we just need to be prepared and have that cybersecurity resilience through that risk management.
And it really is, I guess, looking at it, you know, we all buy property insurance because it's tangible. We know what happens if our building burns down, but we don't think of it, that financial loss of, you know, what happens when we can't access or we can't operate at all. You know, we could move into a building down the road and buy new laptops and things like that and get our systems back up and running quickly because they're not shut down. They might just be burnt down. But what happens when you can't actually do any of that? So
exactly.
That's just kind of, it really just changes your mindset a little bit, because cyber is not there to take away other exposures that are covered by insurance policies. Generally, it's there to sit alongside and pick up those gaps.
Absolutely. Stuart, thank you so much. I have learned a lot today. I just want to put one last call out to everybody on our session today. If you've got any questions, holler now, team, holler now, fire away. But yeah, I've got some takeaways here. We're going to craft an email that everybody will receive post this with a recording too, because I know for myself, it's really good to come back to it. You've given us some really good things we need to start looking at, you know, and simple fixes as well. It's things that it's not unachievable, particularly even another aspect, like you said, people working from home, that changes, you know, that cyber, increases cyber risk as well. So you've definitely given us some really good takeaways to go away and think on, Stuart, and we've got a thank you there too. Thanks, Mary, appreciate that.
Thank you.
This is a narrative we want to start taking our members on. We really believe like I said, it's an area we all need to understand. Today was purely about awareness, and hopefully we've all got some takeaways, some small, simple tips on what we need to be addressing in our business. But we're keen to take this and further educate our members on this space. So keep across, more to come from TIC-SA on cyber insurance, cyber security, cyber risk, everything involved in this new piece, this new risk. It's not a new risk, the risk that is out there, this key area that we need to understand. Thank you, Stuart. We really appreciate your time and expertise today. And I'm sure everybody else has learned something from here. Oh, my light's just gone off, so I'm waving. Every member receives a free health check and insurance program with Gallagher. So we will give you a link to that in our email. So you're more than welcome to activate that and utilize the resources to help you further develop your business. This is what it's about. It's a business development piece, and it's continuing to help you develop your business for long-term sustainability. And, you know, we have a really generous office there from Gallagher's. So you can, if this is an area that you feel like you're not addressing in your business, it's time to start addressing it and utilize the expertise we have through our wonderful partners. Thank you, Stuart. I look forward to exploring this space with you more. Thank you for everybody who's been on the call today. And yeah, look forward to seeing you all again really soon. Have a great day. See you.
Thanks all.